I don't know what I thought a Donald Glover Mr. and Mrs. Smith series would be, but I gotta say, the gumbo works. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. If anybody knows me, I typically don't talk about series that release all their episodes at once. I just hate binge episodes because it's never a point where we can talk about each I like to talk about each episode. And so talking about it as a whole, never really something that I really like. However, if there's a show that I genuinely really like or I can't shake, I kind of want to talk about it. And Mr. and Mrs. Smith falls into that category. It's a new show on Amazon Prime, written by Donald Glover and starring him, and is written by his brother. I think I'm trying to figure out what the genre of this show is because it sort of operates. It can be a quasi spiritual sequel to the Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt version. When we open this series, there are two Mr. and Mrs. Smith. There's a John and a Jane that are in place, and Alexander Skarsgård plays one of the John, and they are your beefcake, your pretty ones. They look like what they could look like with what Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie were. They're taken off the map, and we introduce Donald Glover and Maya. I'm going to mess up her last name, Erskine, as the new John and Jane, and it is amazing to watch this show. I watch this show and I suggest, I hate binging. I don't think you retain anything if you binge an episode, a series. So I've watched this in chunks. I did 3, 3, and 2, which is 8 episodes. I did 3, 3, and 2. And I actually think that's a really good way to watch this because this show kind of operates as a relation, like you're watching a relationship build, like start off, build to the point that they absolutely love each other and then sort of fall apart and some trust and some issues they just don't have. And that sort of happens in the 3 chunks, 3, 3, and 2. There's a ton of chemistry between our John and Jane in this. Like Donald and Maya have a lot of chemistry. Now I know this is a show that originally had Phoebe Waller as sort of Phoebe Waller-Bridge as the original Jane, with what she has with Fleabag. And from my understanding is that she left and Donald amicably left because while they were friends and they worked together before, the vision that she had for the show is a little bit different than the vision that Donald has. And I can see that. This show is very much has some of those weird idiosyncrasies that Atlanta has. And that's why both Donald and Steven are writers on this. But there are moments where you can feel like the Atlanta-isms of it. There's some episodes with Sarah Paulson and a shrink that comes later in the season, or episodes when they're on a mission and he's undercover as a quote unquote back in his environment with a bunch of other black folks at a card table where the Atlanta isms come in. But it is a lot more structured where Atlanta can just do whatever the hell it wants to. It has the Atlanta isms in it, but within the structure of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And so these two are people who kind of leave their normal life or whatever their life is, and sort of decide to go into this this foundation, this group that puts the two of them together. They go through this little test to sort of see who they would be matched up with, and they get matched up together. And it starts off with the two of them not really being on the same page. You get to see them their courting phase. You get to see them sort of dating, and when they start to actually fall in love with each other. And there's a moment where stuff as they go along, these missions make them sort of become closer and fall in love, and they end up falling in love. Some of that love is coming out of necessity, and some of it's because they're the only ones that they have. And is that a true love? And have they actually talked about the things that they want out of life? And they haven't. And so you see the relationship kind of build and crumble under the rush job that they have sort of put. And it's both a romantic drama as well as a romantic comedy and then an action comedy. You do get the moments. You do get the, hey, honey, are you out of bullets? Type of stuff that happens in the Brad Pitt and them, Mr. and Mrs. Smith A lot of that comes in the final episode where they've just had it and they're just kind of shooting it out, which would have been tiresome if they had done that for every episode. So I like that we build up to that point and that's sort of the crescendo to sort of replicate that. Um, but it all comes together. It's a weird sort of gumbo in that it's a true rise, start off, rise, and fall of the relationship intertwined with Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And the hinge point of this, the reason why this all works is their chemistry together. I don't know Maya much from anything. I've not seen anything she has been in, but now I'm sort of infatuated with her. I think they have a great play on each other that just works. And there's moments when later on in the season when they feel like they are best friends, or and then they can also feel like they absolutely hate each other. And then when they have moments where they're drugged and they're telling the truth, it just feels so natural. It feels so truthful that I kind of just I fell in love with both of them, and I kind of want to see what happens next with them. Nothing's been signed off for a season two. It leaves itself on a very open cliffhanger that they could just end it there or they could continue on. There are a lot of great cameos in this. Anytime a show has Parker Posey in it, you can sign me the hell up. I love Parker, and so she does great in this. Won't tell you as what, just watch it. But she does a great job in this. But you have some people like Ron Perlman and Sarah Paulson, all of them doing these great bits. Michaela Cole, all doing these great bits that sort of just add to the Paul Dano, or add to the overall story. And some things don't quite go where you thought. Anytime you think you have something, you're ahead of it a little bit. You're not, and I like that. I like that story is smart. So I think if you're a fan of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the actual film, or the idea of it at least, because I think this is the one thing that may turn some people off. Where Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the film, is just straight up action. It's just action nonstop. There are a lot of moments where this is just taking its time, building up the character beats, and that may rub some people the wrong way. Did not for me because I enjoyed watching that, and I love the odd stuff, the idiosyncrasies that sort of occur. The spending an entire episode um, with another pair of John and James to establish that. Because here's the thing, and I'll say this: any and everything that happens in the first episodes does have a payoff. There's a reason why we're doing certain things. We're going to put these characters in front of you. We're going to put this idea, posit this question to you at this point because it's going to come back up later in the final episode. Just to build that sort of threshold. So if you're a fan of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the idea of it, the concept, the action beat, that threshold, plus you're a fan of just the writing of Atlanta, and you're a fan of just good chemistry and watching a relationship unfold, I think you overall will like this series. It's one of the better things that I've seen in quite some time, and I cannot recommend it enough. But I would say don't binge it because I think you could, similarly to how Poker Face, I wouldn't watch all of those episodes back to back because there can become a sort of familiarity. Whereas this does, you need each episode to sort of build on this. That one you don't. But I think if you take them in sort of chunks, it'll be a better meal for you overall, and you'll just enjoy the ride more, and you won't get sort of tired. Uh, but me watching them that way, I just kept looking forward to coming back to seeing what happened next to the two of them. So I do hope. I know it's been number one on Amazon for a couple of days, a couple of weeks now, but I do hope that it gets a second season. Although who knows when that actually comes out? Because I know they're not going right back into the writers' room, and they're not going right back to shooting. Who knows when season two could come? But I would hope that we could play with these two characters in this world again because I think he's put together a pretty nice. He he being Donald Glover, but I think the two of them have put together a nice sort of show that showcases both of their talents really well and makes me just hungry for more. Have you finished the first season of Mr. and Mrs. Smith? If so, what are your thoughts? What did you guys think about this? Um, is it believable? I think this might be one hang up that some people have. Is it believable to see Donald Glover as an action piece? I think they do a good job of hiding and making him sort of the thinker of the two, whereas this Jane is more of the aggressor. This John is more of the thinker. However it comes, it works for me that I don't have to buy into that he's the strongest person ever. Or he's the biggest, the greatest looking assassins. A lot of times in these assassin shows, they always have like pecs on pecs and the greatest looking guy. Even the John that he has counter to him in this, the two Johns that are counter to him in this, would be the prototype of it, whereas he doesn't. But I think it works for the story that we're being told here. But does it bother you? What do you guys think about this first season of Mr. and Mrs. Smith? Leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on Twitter at Hollywood80. I keep saying, I'm never going to say X. I'm sorry. You can follow us on X at Hollywood80. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name that's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that plays podcasts. We're there. And like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.